Hello and welcome to Just One More Watch, and welcome today to my review of the second release by British micro brand Sherwood. Sherwood is the brainchild of Glynn Reynolds. This is Glynn. He's a thoroughly nice man who has been an important part of this online watch community of ours for years now. As you can probably tell, Glynn is also quite good with Photoshop. He is a graphic designer by trade and has, in inverted commas, fixed several watches for me in the past, including the Casio, the Bulova Aerojet and the Tissot PRX Digital. Perhaps no surprises then that with these graphic design skills, Glynn would soon start his own brand, and indeed he launched Sherwood in early 2023 with his first watch, the Commander, named after Commander Bond. Today, most of the Commander is back, but his name's not Bond, James Bond, it's Fogg, Phileas Fogg, after the fictional Globetrotter, an appropriate name therefore for a travel watch. And indeed, Glynn has done the logical thing and swapped out the Miyota 9039 in the Commander for a Miyota 9075 in the Phileas, and made a GMT watch which launches today, Saturday the 15th of September at 9 AM GMT, of course. And of course I will leave links to the Sherwood website in the description of the video. Early bird prices for these apply until the 27th of October, and then the watch will go to full price. What is the price? I'll tell you shortly, but first let's have a look at the packaging. And I must say the packaging is rather impressive. When I reviewed the Commander last year, Glynn hadn't finalised the packaging, but he ended up choosing a lovely green piano lacquer box. Now the green is not an accident, it's forest green. After all, Glynn lives just on the edge of Sherwood Forest, hence the brand name and the Robin Hood arrows in the brand logo. Now he sent me two of these Phileas models to look at, a red dialed one on the bracelet and the green dialed one on the leather strap, which I'm wearing today. As much as I enjoyed the green version of the Commander, I suspect the red version of the Phileas is going to be the big seller. Red watches are still not all that common, and a red GMT, a red true GMT at that, is even rarer still. I'll tell you what's also rather impressive, the price is impressive. These are £425 on a bracelet or £395 on a leather strap. The leather strap, by the way, is going to be slightly improved for production units. That is a great price for this movement. The Miyota is a true GMT, that will all be discussed in a minute or two. Prices on these movements are still very high. This is the cheapest one that I've seen so far. Perhaps Glynn saved a bit of money by borrowing heavily from the Commander. Indeed, it's the same case, the same bracelet, the watch has the same overall proportions and most of the dimensions. But Glynn's deliberate decision last year to use a very small 3mm bezel insert to maximise the dial space means that the entire GMT complication, including all markings, can be incorporated easily onto the middle of the dial without actually changing the original hands or index pattern. So then, what are those dimensions? Well, it might surprise you to learn after having looked at it for the last couple of minutes, the Phileas is only 40mm in diameter. I think it looks considerably bigger than that because of those aesthetic choices. The case is quite chunky though, at 13.8mm thick. Lug to lug is a nicely wearable 47.4, lug width is 20, there's a bit of a taper on the bracelet down to 18 and back up to 20 for the clasp, and as sized for my average size 7-incher, it weighs in at 175 grams, so definitely a little bit of extra meat with this one. But that weight might change just slightly as Glynn is going to replace the case back. More on that later. Now I'm sure you've spotted this is a dive GMT, so diving bezel and 200 meters of water resistance, double dome sapphire with anti-reflective undercoating, and as discussed, Miyota 9075 movement. Now don't get too attached to the tree, it's not just any tree either, that is the very tree that Robin Hood and the rest of the merry men used to camp underneath apparently, because it's going to be replaced with a see-through caseback for production units, hence why I thought it might share a few grams of weight as well. I'm sure Glynn won't mind me taking the back off one of these for a quick squiz at the 9075. Looks very much like the 9015, doesn't it? 24 jewels, hacking, hand winding, 42-hour power reserve, Japanese made true GMT. Now, if you're not quite sure what that means, it means that unlike the alternative, which is the so-called collar GMT, the 9075 is genuinely suited for global travellers a la Mr. Fogg. So one actually sets the GMT hand and the minute hand first, with the crown pulled out to the second position, then goes back to the first position and adjusts the hour hand. What this means is if you cross a time zone, you don't have to hack the watch. You can just skip forward hours or skip backward hours while the movement is still running. There is a bit of a negative to that though, which I'll discuss in the moans and niggles section later. The case is a straight up carryover from the Commander. It's simple but slightly chunky, high polished sides with brushed upper lug surfaces and high polished tips to those lugs. It's an unguarded 6mm crown that offers loads and loads of grip when you need to use it. The high polished coin edge bezel doesn't offer quite as much grip, but it is nicely tactile. It has a great action, 120 click unidirectional of course, and it's stiff enough that you're not going to knock it by accident. And I'm sure you've noticed it may be a dive GMT, but the grading on the bezel is more notional than functional. Just 5-minute dashes to the 20 and 5-minute markers thereafter. Glynn's suggestion with his watch, it is his watch after all, is that you set the bezel symmetrically. So the resting position is with 2 of those dashes either side of the 12. Whether or not you do that is up to you, but how many watches do you know that have their own unique way of setting the bezel? The Jubileer bracelet is also carried over from the Commander. That's what I call these anyway. It's a kind of flat link Jubilee. But it should be noted that they are only single links, not 5-piece links. They're just edged and polished to look like they are. That means not much articulation, but the end links are solid and it's screws holding the whole thing together. It's a nice clasp though, with 1 centimeter of on-the-fly adjustment across 5 different positions. It's very, very easy to operate, and like the bezel, it's nice and tactile. And it has the Sherwood brand name / logo etched landscape style into it, which is a little bit different as well. Dial and hands, let's go macro then, and let's have a look at both of these watches. Most of the features are also carried over from the Commander. So big applied indices with high polished silver surrounds, rectangles at the 3 and 9, a small square at the 6 and a large heraldic style shield at the 12, another nod to Mr. Hood, and circles everywhere else. I would describe the dial as a kind of satin gloss finish, if that makes sense. There is a noticeable sunburst effect that gets even more noticeable when you take the watch outside into natural light. Now, as discussed, because of all that dial real estate, Glynn was able to squeeze the GMT markings into a central ring. Although admittedly, it is a rather small central ring. Slightly recessed numerals and circular markers on the hours, and there's even an attempt to differentiate day and night using those kind of dash marks, and it's a rather attractive crescent gently cupping rather than rudely pointing to the second time zone. Talking of hands, they are also carried over with high polished segmented swords with a bevel down the middle, and Glynn's now signature arrow, literally arrow second hand, with coloured tip and feathered high polished counterbalance. I must say it's a very neat way to integrate a GMT complication without it overwhelming the dial. It almost becomes something of a bonus rather than taking over, but as such the GMT markings are all rather small. And a final thumbs up though goes to the date complication. Not only is it at 6 to retain symmetry, but it's also very nicely colour matched. Now you have a choice of 2 different dial colours, but within that choice you also get 2 different colours of lume. So it's green on the left using C3 Superluminova and red on the right using BGW9 Superluminova. If you know your Superluminova, your money is on the BGW9 outlasting the C3. And you know what? You just lost your money. Not in this case. For whatever reason, perhaps it's because they're prototypes, the C3 actually outlast the BGW9, but either way, they both do very well for themselves. The Phileas, I'm sure, will be able to hold its own comfortably with any watch at its price point in terms of lume. On wrist, well, it's a comfortable watch. There are no sharp edges and the bracelet is nice and smooth as well. Plus the clasp offers plenty of adjustability. And it definitely, I think, looks like a 42 rather than a 40, thanks to that deliberately thin bezel insert. I'm sure that will please some who like a smaller watch that looks like a bigger watch, but it might end up looking a little bit too big for others, especially when combined with a thickness of 13.8 and a weight of 175 grams. That is quite a lot for a 40mm. Nice legibility from the main hands though, thanks to the proportionally large dial real estate. Alright, moans and niggles. Glynn is a lovely man, but I'm still going to complain just a little bit about his watch. For a start, colours. Green, red. If you don't like green or red, you're shit out of luck. I'm surprised therefore he didn't offer a more conservative black or blue colour version. He offered both of those with the Commander though, so I guess he's offering what he thinks will sell. What do I know? And it's a chunky monkey at just under 14mm thick. I know there's that undercut at the bottom to try and disguise the thickness, but you definitely notice it on wrist, and I definitely noticed it when compared to the 12.5mm Commander. Perhaps 100 meters of water resistance and a slightly slimmer watch might have been a better compromise for the Phileas. And I did say there was a negative to a true GMT movement earlier on. That is, it's not as easy to set the date. You do have to flick that hour hand on 24 times every time you want to roll the date wheel forward 1 day. That means that if this is a rotation piece and you pick it up on the 5th of the month but the date is already set to the 8th of the month, you've got a job on your hands, or you just leave the date. So, great for travellers, perhaps not great for those who have a big collection and this is going to be a rotation piece rather than a daily. And then there's the looks overall. Looks of course are always subjective and perhaps this one resonates with you, but that whole Sherwood theme with the literal arrow second hand and the shield at 12 might be a little bit too much for some people. Perhaps then the loss of the tree on the back for production units is not a bad thing. And the model name Phileas, although thoughtful and appropriate, perhaps again that will resonate with some more than it resonates with others. And finally, considering this watch's USP is the GMT, you're going to have pretty sharp eyes if you want to read those numerals because they are very, very small. As is the brand logo, but perhaps that's not such a bad thing because it was rather large on the Commander. And if you bought the Commander, is there enough here to encourage you to buy the Phileas as well? There's always a danger when you base your second watch on your first watch that you end up making watches that are very, very similar. I said exactly the same thing when I reviewed NMI's second release a few months ago. I'm sure therefore the Phileas will bring some new customers to Glynn's brand, but perhaps there won't be as many people who bought the Commander jumping in for this one because they are just so similar. But if you didn't buy the Commander and this one speaks to you in one of those two strong and vibrant colours, then go for it. That is a great price for a 9075 in today's market, and I have no doubt that Glynn's customer service as a one-man owner-operator is fantastic. So there you have it. Well done for making it all the way to the back end of the video. Why not check out my review of the Commander here or the Bulova Devil Diver GMT with an updated version of the same Miyota in the back of it just here. Thanks for watching this one. I'll see you again in the next one.